And that's going to end up happening in the McLean House, which is that red brick building. That's where the surrender will happen. But you may be wondering by now, why is this kid going on and on about the battles here? And why I'm talking about this is because these two battles, because they stopped Lee's army, because they blocked him from going west, decisively ended the Civil War. And you may not get the surrender in that house or the end of the Civil War without these two battles. Because of their decisiveness and because of blocking Lee's retreat west, that ends the Civil War, because Lee is surrounded. So that's what makes these two battles important, because they do something no other Union army has ever done before. They forced Robert E. Lee's army in Northern Virginia to surrender. And because of that, they forced the end of the Civil War. That's what those USCTs did up on that ridge behind me, is they quite literally ended the Civil War, along with the Army of the James. And it wasn't for them, you may not get the surrender that happens over here. And if you remember at the beginning of the talk, I asked, what makes a Civil War battle important? In this case, it's not about the casualties. It's not about the fighting. In this case, it's about strategy and maneuverability of the Union Army. All in all, from the 2 days of fighting, there's about 2,000 casualties, which is a lot. Any casualty is bad. But in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to Civil War casualties, that's not a lot of casualties. And here we see that. We see the strategy and maneuverability of the Union Army, the strategy to relentlessly pursue Lee and force him to surrender, fight him at every step, and give him no room to retreat. You see that here, and along the campaign I talked about. And you also see the maneuverability of the Union Army, like the Army of the James, to make that forced night march, those USCTs and the rest of the Army of the James, to get just in place when they need to be. Remember I talked about that earlier, of moving your army and getting them where they need to be. That's maneuverability. And that's what the Army of the James does that day. And because of that, they decisively bring an end to the Civil War. These two battles are the two most decisive battles of the Civil War. And they don't get the notoriety as Gettysburg or Antietam, but since they forced Lee to surrender and stopped him here, they ended the Civil War. And they are what led to what happens in that house over there, which is the Army surrendering and the Civil War ending. Now there's a quote from a man in the 57th Virginia, or excuse me, not the Virginia, the 57th Massachusetts. He's a Union soldier who fought here on the morning of the 9th. And he made a statement after this, and the quote is, "Most of those who had borne the heat and burden of the day were heartily glad it was over. We of the Union Army, equally so with the defeated Confederate. We had all the fighting we wanted, and were glad the prospect which now seemed near, realization of laying aside the implements of war and walking again in the paths of peace, was finally near." And I think, folks, today we can hope that both the Confederate soldiers and Union soldiers that fought on the 8th and the 9th both felt that way after the battle. And with that, folks, that is my talk. I'd like to thank you all for coming out. You've been a great audience. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will be here to answer any questions you may have for the next couple minutes, so thank you.
Good job. Who's buried over there?